Miles and Madeline had been united for nearly a decade. Their bond was the epitome of a flourishing relationship: mutual admiration, deep affection, genuine care. These and countless other warm sentiments could aptly describe the pair. Yet this had not always been the case. Madeline, in her tempestuous youth, often drove Miles to the brink with her dramatic outbursts when they first started dating. Ever the epitome of calm, Miles endured these episodes with remarkable fortitude, never letting them faze him, until one day, Madeline's theatrics ceased altogether. When Miles eventually decided to pop the question, he sensibly realized it would require a significant financial commitment. His then current employment situation, though sufficient for day-to-day living, left much to be desired in terms of financial stability. Seeking a better path, he consulted his father, who proposed he join the family business. The role demanded both intellect and dedication, but came with a handsome salary. The primary drawback: regular business trips. After weighing his options, Miles accepted the offer and never looked back. He grew fond of the job. During these trips away, Madeline found comfort and support from her elder sister and brother-in-law. Madeline's parents had passed away before she graduated high school, leaving her elder sister to step into a maternal role. This sister frequently checked in on Madeline, inquiring about her well-being, her meals, and her personal life. With a 12-year age gap between them, Madeline often bristled at the notion that her older sister still considered her childish. She'd frequently shout, "You're not my mom," before hanging up the phone, stewing and thinking about the perfect retort to needle her sister further. This dynamic had roots in their childhood, where Madeline had grown accustomed to her sister's protective bouts. Generally speaking, she was pretty laid back and never held grudges against her sister for too long. Eventually, the younger sibling came to understand how her actions had deeply hurt the one who had stepped in to fill their mother's shoes. 3 years prior, Isabel tied the knot with a man named Carson. Madeline was over the moon that her beloved sister had found joy in a second marriage. Miles and Carson hit it off right away, discovering they had much in common and notably, a mutual affection for Madeline. From the moment they met, Carson was smitten with his wife's sister, though he constantly reminded himself he was committed to another. He harbored secret feelings for Madeline for a whole year until, during a customary family celebration at the country house, she unexpectedly barged into his room with a clear intention. After that, their private encounters became a regular occurrence. Unassuming Miles remained blissfully unaware of his wife's clandestine escapades and his friend's involvement during his absence. Little did he know that a potential family scandal was unfolding right under his nose. The affair might have continued unnoticed had it not been for a fortuitous slip. Up to this point, Madeline and Carson had never risked a long breakup. Their meetings were brief, either at her house when her husband was not at home, or in a secluded place near the city. For them, this was the first time they had decided on something as daring as spending a few days in seclusion, which seemed to them excitingly reckless. Carson made up a story that he needed to visit his company's main office, and Madeline told a story about relaxing in picturesque places with friends, away from the chaos of the city. Miles saw no reason to doubt his wife's words, completely unaware of the impending forbidden romance. On a beautiful Saturday morning, Miles was suddenly awakened by a shrill phone call while he was on a business trip. At first, he tried to ignore it, believing that he still had enough precious time to sleep. However, the caller's persistence increased, and he started calling several times in a row. Annoyed and sleep-deprived, the grumpy guy replied rather impolitely, "Who's calling?" "Miles." He was greeted on the other end by a worried voice belonging to his neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. This change in tone immediately alerted Miles, prompting him to ask, "Well, Mrs. Jenkins, what seems to be the matter?" The woman said that water was pouring from her ceiling, while everything seemed dry in the apartment located directly above her. Thus, a predicament arose in her own home and in Madeline's shared living area. Miles tensed, knowing that his wife was away and wouldn't be back for another day. He immediately decided to turn to Carson and Isabel to fix the situation before his wife inadvertently flooded another home. Expressing gratitude to his neighbor, Miles hastily groped for his friend's contact details on the phone and eagerly dialed the number. However, all he heard was a deep silence on the other end of the line, as his acquaintance seemed to be unavailable. Cursing under his breath, he dialed his wife's number, but got the same result. Disappointment and confusion washed over him, causing his hands to tremble as he gripped the phone tightly. Isabel answered the call almost instantly. She listened attentively to the stormy story and then, after a short pause, asked, "Where's Madeline?" Inquisitive minds would naturally ponder such a question. "Gone God knows where," Miles bellowed in Isabel's ear. "And she didn't bother to tell me about it, because that's the way it is. She left, and I was left all alone." Isabel, thinking in confusion, muttered, "Is her phone off too?" Unlike Miles, who was blissfully unaware of his wife's infidelity, Isabel had already learned the truth about her husband's transgressions. There was definitely someone else in his life, although she had yet to find out who it was. Now, when she heard from her brother-in-law that both her sister and her husband had turned off their phones while outside the city, a painful suspicion arose in her mind, hinting at the terrible possibility that this was something more than a simple coincidence. But she kept her suspicions to herself, not wanting to alarm Miles unnecessarily. After assuring the worried man that she would immediately go to their house, turn off the water, and solve all the issues, she received a heartfelt thank you. Isabel went to her sister with a heavy heart. When she entered the apartment and went to the kitchen to turn off the water, she found something completely inappropriate on the kitchen table: her husband's wristwatch. He had never worn this style, preferring more sporty clothes, and it was impossible not to recognize the watch that she had once given him with love from the bottom of her heart a few years ago. Initials were engraved on the back of the dial, a clear sign that the watch belonged to her husband. Isabel's heart ached. She hesitated to tell her brother-in-law about everything, fearing that he might not believe her or reprimand her for accusing her own husband. After all, there was a chance the watch ended up there by accident when Carson brought groceries for his sister to save her from having to carry heavy bags. However, her intuition told her otherwise. While Isabel was telling Miles this complicated story, he listened attentively without interrupting. He tried his best to believe what he had heard, but the hard evidence in the form of a watch confused him. He asked her to wait until he could join her in the city, where the two of them would fight the traitors. With a heavy heart, Isabel reluctantly agreed. The lady meticulously organized a dinner for the evening when she and Miles were set to confront the lovers. Throughout the week, she had been pondering what the outcome would be. However, reality diverged from her expectations. None of them refuted their actions when Miles posed the evening's pivotal question. Both Carson and Madeline confessed without hesitation, responding affirmatively almost straight away. After the disclosure, continuing the dinner seemed pointless. The lovers expressed apologies to their respective partners, packed their things, and left. Miles and Isabel remained, sitting in shocked silence with open mouths and shattered hearts, blindsided by deceit. Post-divorce, Miles wanted nothing to do with his ex-wife. However, snippets of information sometimes filtered through. He learned that Carson and Madeline had reconciled and even had a child together. Yet, after 3 years of marriage, she found him in bed with another woman. In a way, Miles relished that his ex-wife experienced firsthand what she had caused. He took a certain grim satisfaction in it. Madeline's own actions boomeranged back to her, shattering her life with an undeniable force.